So let's talk about some part 4 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable. So in an interview, apparently Araki once said that he debated just ending the JoJo storyline with part 3 just because the ending of part 3 really ties everything up quite nicely. It forms a nice little trilogy about the Joestar bloodline and everything up to that point. There's no real loose ends, and it just would have overall been a nice conclusion to the manga series. Now, eventually he did decide to continue the series, and hell, it's still ongoing today. And I will say that I think at the time that would have kind of been a scary thing because you don't want to risk ruining something by continuing it and just kind of expanding something that doesn't need to be expanded. Thankfully, part 4 is of high quality and it doesn't feel like it's unnecessary at all, and in fact, it is quite possibly one of the better JoJo parts. Diamond is Unbreakable takes place in the year 1999 in the small Japanese town of Morio. The town has been haunted by a series of strange murders that have taken place over the years, and to make matters worse, a stand-creating bow and arrow that was once used by Dio has seemed to found its way into the town. Morio is also home to Josuke Higashikata, the main character of Part 4, and the child of Joseph Joestar after he had an affair. Jotaro, with the aid of the Speedwagon Foundation, goes to Morio to track down the bow and arrow, and also Josuke, who is, strangely enough, technically also his uncle. Josuke and Jotaro join forces, and they eventually create a small group of stand users with the main goal of hunting down the bow and arrow, while also stopping the serial killer hiding out in Morio. Overall, I really enjoyed Diamond is Unbreakable's story, but I think it kind of has a weak first half. It really sets it up like Josuke and friends are going to be investigating what's going on in town, but really in practice, it really just seems like they're messing around and waiting for stand users to attack them. And what really hurts it, in my opinion, is that it lacks a sense of direction, which is kind of funny because the series name is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and it really doesn't feel like they're going on an adventure. It feels almost like, I don't want to say a slice of life series or anything like that, but it feels like they really are just waiting around for people to attack them and then they deal with them, and it kind of goes on for that kind of style for the first half of the manga, and then the second half really picks it up into gear where they decide to go after the serial killer in town, and it at that point it feels like the series has direction and it feels like it's going somewhere. Because the characters are more active, they're going out and actually doing stuff more often. It's not as passive and easygoing as the first half, and it gets a bit more serious there too, which I really enjoy. I will say, I think Part 4 was meant to be a bit more character-focused, and you have a decent bunch of characters in the main cast that are fairly interesting. I particularly really liked Koichi. Josuke is a great protagonist, by the way, but I don't have too much to say about him other than I really enjoy his personality. But I really liked Koichi and how he was kind of nervous and how he kind of grew as the series went on and became a little bit more of a badass. I really like Rohan. He's interesting. I know a lot of people don't really care for Rohan because he is a manga author and people kind of blame Araki or accuse Araki of kind of inserting like an avatar for the author in the series with Rohan, but I don't really think Rohan and Araki are that similar, and I think people kind of confuse Araki's commentary on being a manga author for him trying to create an avatar through Rohan for himself. I mean, hell, if I were to write a series about someone who was a programmer, I think it would be very hard for me not to throw some commentary in there about the occupation because it's something I'm very familiar with and something that I do on a regular basis. So I can kind of understand where Araki would throw in maybe some commentary or some messages about being a manga author because the character in the story is like him, a manga author, and it's kind of hard to not do that when you're writing something. The serial killer, Akira, is amazingly written, and in my opinion, he is probably better written than Dio. I still prefer Dio to Kira, just in terms of villains, but I will say I think Kira is better written than Dio, even though I prefer Dio. Really, I love his personality quirks, and he's just a very strange man. He's very, very clearly a psychopath. And just like the weird sort of obsessions and just tics he has to his personality really, really make him quite nuanced and detailed as far as JoJo characters go. Like, he has this weird thing where he has this strange fetish for female hands, and he also has this obsession with keeping his fingernails collected in jars and stuff. And he's just really strange and really creepy, and like every scene with him is just uncomfortable, but in a good way, where you just want to see people beat the shit out of him because he just is so creepy and he is so evil that you just are waiting for him to get what's coming to him. And I think that's a great trait for a villain in any piece of media, really. I also really enjoy Kira's stand because I'd say it's less powerful than Dio's, because Dio's is pretty powerful to the point where I think Araki kind of needed to bullshit a plot device out of the way so that the main character could win in part 3. I feel like the stands are better thought out as a whole in part 4. That's kind of reflected in the final battle, where Kira's stand is very powerful, but it very obviously is not almighty in any sense of the term. And I think overall, in general, the stands in part 4 are a lot better thought out and just more creative, because there's not any particularly powerful ones, I'd say. Like, they're all kind of just weird and have very, very specific uses, and they're just kind of strange and unique in that sort of way. And that makes for a lot more interesting fights and a lot more interesting scenes with people using their stands in creative ways, and that was a large part of the fun of part 4 for me. I know I mentioned a bit how the first half of the story kind of has a problem with a lack of direction, but one thing I really enjoy about part 4 that I feel like part 3 kind of was bad with, and I think I mentioned it in my part 3 review even, is that part 3, it had some moments that were kind of slow. At times it felt like kind of a drag to read through. Part 4 is a bit faster paced, and there was never a point where I was really bored or felt like it was going too slowly. And I really appreciated that. It always felt like something interesting was happening or going on, and I never really felt like it was a chore to read through. One last plot thing I want to talk about before I move on is that part 4 is probably the most lighthearted JoJo part, and like I said before, it does get a bit more serious and a bit darker as the story comes to a close. But there's a lot of moments of comedy here. There's a lot of easygoing sections of the story. I think part of this has to do with the fact that this is the youngest JoJo protagonist we've had as of at least the first 4 parts. The part 5 protagonist is even younger, but part 5 is a bit more serious. But I'd say probably a large part of this has to do with the fact that the main cast is made up of high schoolers, and they do kind of go on random high school tangents and stuff like that, and kind of just mess around a bit inside the story. And Josuke is a bit of a mischievous kid, and they kind of get into some comedic situations and stuff too. And I think overall Araki handles it really well, and it was kind of a breath of fresh air because part 3 can get awfully serious at points. And that's not to say that part 4 doesn't get serious, because it sure does, especially towards the end, like I was saying before. But it was really nice to have kind of that easygoing nature to the part as a whole. One last thing I want to touch on before I close out the review is the art style change. Now, parts 1, 2, and 3 are kind of infamous because they have a lot of character designs that look like they were, I guess, Fist of the North Star inspired, at least in terms of main characters go and stuff like that. And part 4 is where Araki starts to make a shift in his art style, and he gets kind of into the more flamboyant nature of his later art, or at least his modern day art. And the shift is kind of weird at first because while it is gradual, if you look at the first issue of Diamond is Unbreakable and you look at the last issue of Diamond is Unbreakable, you can see that the art styles do not line up at all. So part 4 is kind of this weird transitionary phase in Araki's art style. And sometimes there's a few hiccups because of that. Sometimes things look a little weird, but overall I do enjoy his new style. I know a lot of people aren't particularly a fan of modern Araki art and think that part 1, 2, and 3 look a lot better. I enjoy the nice, like, I guess artistic, fashion-y sort of style that he goes for nowadays. I think it's very unique, and I think it stands out amongst a lot of other anime and manga stuff. So to close out the review, I will say that Diamond is Unbreakable is pretty damn good. Not my favorite part. I still think I like 2 the best. As far as ranking the series, I'd say so far it's 2, 4, 3, 1 in terms of my favorite to least favorite parts. Depending on what day you ask me, I might swap around 1 and 3. But I'm really enjoying JoJo's still, and I'm like halfway done with part 5 as of recording, and I kind of have this weird sort of conundrum going on because as of this recording, part 5 is receiving a new translation from a different team, and this is important because the old translation is kind of bad, and in my opinion it negatively impacts the quality of the series, at least for part 5. So what I might do is I think I'm going to review part 5 after I finish the old scans, and then when the new translation finishes, I think I want to go back and re-review it. And I just wanted to say that because as I read part 5, I started with the new translation, and then I ran out of issues that they've covered because they're still doing the translation. And then as soon as I had to convert to the older scans that have been done that are of lower quality, I started to like part 5 less and less, and I have gone back through to read issues that have been since covered by the new translation, and I liked them a lot more. So I do really think that the quality of the translation is hurting my enjoyment of part 5 a little bit. So yeah, like I said, I think I'm gonna review it as soon as I finish it with the old scans, and then I'll re-review it after I finish the new translation. So yeah, I'm still gonna be covering JoJo's stuff, and I hope this review gave you a feeling so complicated.